Good morning and namaste to all of you. Let's start the class with the prayers. Om Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwaraha, Guru Sakshat Parbrahma, Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha. Om Bhur Bhuvaswaha, Tatsavitvarenayam, Bhargo Devasya Dhimahi, Dhiyo Yo Nah Prachodayat. Asto Ma Satgamya, Tamso Ma Jyotirgamya, Mrityorma Amritam Gamya. Om Sehna Vavatu, Sehna Bhunaktu, Saviryam Karvavahi, Tejasvinavadhitamastu, Ma Vidveshavahi. Om Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Om. So last week in this class we saw how good of a student, the best of the best, this young boy is Nachiketa, with all the qualifications, where he's fully detached from all the temptations of this physical world, where he's calm also, collected also, he knows what his duties are also, and he knows how to perform those duties also. And that's why we'll see in this section 2, which is called Dvitevali, how Yamarajji is appreciating his qualities also. So that means to become a disciple of Atma Gyan, we need to cultivate these qualities too. This is the message for us. We got to see that, do we have Vivek, Vairagya, Sham, Dam, all those qualities or not? If we don't cultivate those. Okay. So let's start the class with verse number 1 from Dvitevali. Anyat Shreha, Anyat Ut Ev Preya, Te Ubhe Nana, Arthe Purusham Sinitaha, Tayo Shreya, Ad Danasya Sadhu Bhavati, Hiyate Arthat Yau Preya Vrinate. Anyat means one. Shreya, the good. Anyat, another. Ut means and, Ev means indeed, Preya, pleasant. Te means these, Ubhe, two, Nana, different, Arthe, objective, Purusham, the person, Sinitaha, chains or bindings, Sinita. Tayo, of these two, Shreya, the good, Ad Danasya, who chooses, Sadhu, good, Bhavati, becomes, Hiyate, falls away or gets deviated, Arthat, from the goal, Ya means he or who, Preya, the pleasant, Vrinitehe, chooses. The two key words over here, Preya and Shreya. So Yamarajji is saying one is good, while another indeed is pleasant. These two, having different objectives, bind a person. Blessed is he who between these two chooses the good alone. But he who chooses what is pleasant loses the goal, the true end. So we can see that after testing the disciple, he is finding him worthy of the great knowledge. So this is the message he is giving it to him before even starting out the deep knowledge. And in a way, he is congratulating him also, telling him that you chose the good, not the pleasant. See, good is one thing and pleasant is another. As human beings, we do countless actions. And often we are motivated by this irresistible instinct to be happy. All our actions are because we want to be happy. Happiness seems to be the goal for all of us. All the struggle, all the strife of this life, we want to be happy. But where is that full and absolute happiness, which we call contentment? We think by fulfilling the worldly desires, we'll be happy. Over here, he is clearly telling us that there's two divisions. The fruits of actions could be two kinds. Those contributing to the temporary joys in life, that is pleasant, that is prey, and those leading to the immortal blissfulness of the beyond. So in other words, some of our actions, we see the immediate passing material gain. But some of our actions contribute in the long run for the purification and the self-culturing also. We are, as human beings, we are free to build our lives upon the more enduring principles of living. Honesty, piety, truthfulness, mercy, love, tolerance. These are the greater wealth. If we are automatically going towards the temporary wealth, we are on the path of prayer, not Shreya. So that's why he is saying the two paths of choice freely open for each and every one of us. So he is hinting over here that you did not choose that path of pleasant, the prayer's path. See, one is good, while another is pleasant, he says. Which is good, that doesn't mean that it's always pleasant. Exercise, taking care of this body, eating healthy food, it is good for us, but it may not be pleasant. But at the same time, there are pursuits which are good and at the same time pleasant also. It doesn't mean that good is always unpleasant. But sometimes in the beginning, it seems like, because we are not used to it, it seems very unpleasant to us. But over here, Nachiketa, a young boy, is a spiritual hero who right away and towards the end also, even after being offered all those temptations for this worldly good, he stayed on the path of good. But then look at this statement. Both these chain a person. So Shreya also and the prey also, they both chain. This is very significant. So somebody casually might say that if they do, both of them chain me, why do I really need to choose the good path? But when we think deeply about it, what he's talking about, the pleasant will chain us right now. And if we are making the decisions based upon the heavenly abode, then that's a chain too. Okay, we've got to keep that in mind. So to the perfect seeker of the absolute, both the path of pleasant and the path of good are bondages. Both of them are. So we got to do something which is good, definitely, because we cannot do without action, but we got to rise above that also. And he'll teach us that too. So how to do the meritorious acts without being chained by the outcome. Shreya cha preya cha manusyam etatau sampritehe vivinaktihi dhiraha Shreya hi dhira preyasa abhivrinite preya mandha yoga kshemat vrinite. Again, Shre means the good, Cha means and, Preya means the pleasant. Cha means and, Manushyam, the human being, the person. Etaha, approach. Tau means these. So that means these two. Samprityehe, having examined from all sides. So that means making decision consciously. Vivinaktihi discriminates. Dhiraha, the wise man, the wise person. Shreya, he, the good only, he means indeed or only. Shreya, the good. Dhiraha, the wise person. Priyasa, to the pleasant. Abhivrinite, prefers. Priya, the pleasant. Mandaha, the ignorant. Yog kshemat. Yog means getting, kshemat means keeping. Okay. Vrinite, chooses. Both the good and the pleasant approach the mortal person. So that means that both paths are there for us to choose all the time. The wise person examines them thoroughly. See, that's sampriti means thinks about it deeply and discriminates between the two. The wise person prefers the good to the pleasant. The ignorant person chooses the pleasant for the sake of his body. Through extreme greed, because this is what happens. We become greedy. We choose the pleasant. And attachment also. See, this shame means attachment. When we want to keep it, hold it, we don't want to let it go. That is shame, yoga and shame. So that means life is a series of choices. Moment to moment, we are faced with choices. Question mark in our mind, should I do this or should I not do that? Okay, the choices, all of us have choice. This is the beauty of a human life. Temptation after temptation approach us. See, just like Nachiketa, Lord of Death, tried to tempt him with all kinds of wealth. So the same thing happens to us also. But we forget the future becomes the present and it rolls right in front of us. And we don't make the right choice. So we have to make sure we use our intellect, we use our discrimination power, where our decisions are good for us. Because material objects are finite. They can never remain the same. Nothing remains the same in this material world. So we got to remember that when we make the choices. So at each challenge, he's saying two paths are open for us to follow. One side we are temptingly, playfully, this Maya is dancing in front of us. That is the path of pleasant. But this path ultimately leads us to darkness. That's why he said the mandaha, the ignorant chooses that path. But on the other side lies a quite uninviting path, which is not used by many people. That is such a winding road upward road, people don't want to take it. But that is the path of the good. Path of the good. Okay. So the wise, so he is clearly telling us who is wise and who is ignorant. The wise and the discriminating person at each moment intelligently keeps on judging, keeps on thinking. Early in the morning, I'm supposed to get up from my warm bed, do my meditations, do my sadhana. Sure, staying in the bed is very pleasant. Another minute, another minute. But getting up even before you promise that you'll get up, that is the path of good. Okay? Just remember, as a serious student, I have told you many times, get up before the sunrise. You should see the sun rising. Sun should never see you rising. That should be the very first thing we should follow. And it's not pleasant, but it's good. So wise person follows it. This discipline. Okay. So stick to the path of good. Only then you will continue your pilgrimage and ultimately fulfill this mission of life, a human life. But on the ignorant person, follows the path of least resistance. And if you look at it, path of pleasant is mainly motivated by animal urges of the body. What tastes good? Being lazy, greed, hoarding, that's all path of pleasant. It's pleasing to the senses. So sensuous modes of satisfying every demand of our senses. My eyes want it, my ears want that. Okay, so that's why the beautiful idea hinted at these two opening verses is the logic of self-effort. Okay, we got to make a purusharth, it's called. As a student, as a seeker, as a sadhak, we need to understand this logic of self-effort. Nobody else is going to do it for us. We got to do it. At each moment of challenge, the path of pleasant and the path of good are stretched right in front of us. And we just make a little mistake and it's very easy to slip down on the path of pleasant. Yeah. I mean, I'm sure you all have experienced that in the morning, if you're supposed to get up at 5 o'clock and you say another 5 minutes of sleep, before you know, it's 2 hours. How those 5 minutes just went by? 2 hours just slipped by in 5 minutes. We never know. That's what happens, slipping down. So at each moment, a person has limited freedom to follow either the path of good or the path of the pleasant. Okay, limited. So that's why we got to look at it very deeply. That, hey, am I on the right path or not? See, all of this, whether we are following any religion, whether we are studying these Upanishads, deep Upanishads, they are teaching us the art of perfection, self-perfection. And art of self-perfection is always with a careful living of each moment as a wise person. The wisdom has to be there. We got to learn how to think deeply. So we got to learn to cultivate and train the mind so that we can tune our mind away from the impermanent sensuality. Got to training. So tune the mind to think, to act in terms of the higher and the permanent values of life, not the temporary pleasures, love, tolerance, mercy, etc. That's how we perfect ourselves. Okay. So we are ourselves. Remember, we are the architects of our future. We are the maker of our destiny. Nobody else. That's why this is an art of perfection, art of living. Let's look at verse number 3. Satvam priyan priya rupan cha kaman abhidhyayan nachiketah etam srinkam vitamyam na avapyatah yasyam manjanti bahava manushya. So this is verse number 3. And all these verses are spoken by Nachiketa. I'm sorry, Lord of Death, Yamraj. Okay, so starting with the first verse of this chapter. So, Tvam, such as you are. Tvam. Priyan, beloved. Priya Rupan cha, pleasant in appearance. Kaman, desires. Abhidhyayan, judging them. Nachiketa. Atyantya trakshihi, that means renounced. Etam, these, srinkam, chains. Vitamyem, road of wealth. Na avapataha, has not accepted. Yasyam, in which. Manjanti, drown. Bahava, many. Manushyaha, men, people. O Nachiketa, you have renounced all these desires and pleasurable objects of the pleasant appearance. You remember he offered him the sons and the grandsons and the wealth and the kingdom everywhere. This lok, another lok, the beautiful ladies singing, music, elephants, horses, everything, gold, jewels, whatnot. So that's why he's saying that you have renounced all these desirable, all these desires and pleasurable objects of pleasant appearance, because average person is looking for those desirable, judging them by their real merits. You have not accepted this road of wealth in which men, mortal men, sink. So that means average person, or majority of us, we get tempted by these. And he's saying, you have not. So it's almost like a burst of applause rising from the heart of Yamraj. He is finding this young Brahman, Nachiketa, that he says that you are able to withstand all the temptations which a mortal person cannot. There's a word over here, srinkam, the second word in the second line. That means a garland. That means a chain also. So garland is a chain, or that means the path also. So that means that Lord of Death is surprised at the sense of detachment in Nachiketa, in the rejection of that jeweled garland of all these worldly things. Or the path of the wealth, you can look at it, that he could resist the temptation to walk on the path of wealth. Rare indeed are such chances for a great master to have the blessings of meeting an equally great student. Students are many, but student of this caliber. That's why Lord of Death just keeps on applauding. That look at you. That you could reject all these temptations and you have the strength. Similar kind of a strength, the discrimination power, where you could judge the difference between the real and the false. Real and the false. You are going towards the real and rejecting the false. Duram ete vipritehe vishuchi vidyaha yacha vidya iti gyataha vidya bhi sanam na nachiketsam manye na tvakamaha bahava a lolupanta. Duram, that means wide or far. Ete, these are. Vipritehe, opposite. Vishuchi, leading to different ends. Avidya, ignorance. Ya means what, cha means end. Vidya iti, as knowledge. Gyata is known. Vidya bhipsanam, desirous of knowledge. Nachiketsam, manye, I believe. Na means not. Tva, you. Kamaha, desires. Bahava, many. Alolupatam, shake. These two, ignorance and what is known as knowledge. So vidya and avidya. So these two, ignorance and what is known as knowledge, are wide apart. Duram. And lead to different ends or goals. So vidya will take us on one place, or vidya will take far away from that goal. I believe Nachiketa to be one who is desirous of knowledge. For even many objects of pleasures have not shaken you. So these first 4 verses, it's like a stream of thought that came to flash through the mind of Lord of Death. So they all 4 go together. So Lord of Death estimates his observation and result of his experiment with the Nachiketas in this stanza. So over here in his mind, the Lord of Death has decided that this Brahman boy is indeed a fit student for this great knowledge. That's what it means. Vidya and avidya. The mandbuddhi, the ignorant, they go on the path of avidya. And this young boy is wise. He's a young boy. But wisdom is not calculated by the number of the years we have spent on this earth. He's a wise boy. And he is choosing the vidya. And he says that these are wide apart. The goal. Avidyayam antrehe vartamana swayam dhira panditam manyamanaha dandrameyamanaha pariyanti mudaha andhen evniyamana yatha anda. Avidyayam, in ignorance. Antre, in the midst. Vartamana, who live. Swayam dhira, wise themselves. Panditam, learned. Manyamanaha, fancying themselves. Dandramyamana, deluded in many crooked ways. Pariyanti, go round and round. Mudaha, the ignorant. Andhen, by the blind. Ev means verily, niyamanaha, being led. Yatha means as, andha, the blind. So Yamraj is saying the ignorant who live in the midst of darkness, but fancy themselves to be wise and learned, go round and round, deluded in many crooked ways, just as the blind being led by the blind. This comparison he's using over here is quite impressive. That's why this particular verse is often used by some of the, you can call it a Vidwans. Okay? Because over here, there's a criticism for a smaller Pandit, if you want to call it. A Pandit who has taken the duties of guiding the society or the community, calling themselves the gurus. But it's almost like a blind leading the blind. Similar statement is in the Bible also. If the blind lead the blind, both shall fall into the ditch. And that's what is hinted over here in this particular verse. Any amount of book knowledge cannot make a person a wise. Maybe a Vidwan, a scholar, but not a real scholar in the real sense, unless a person has come to live in a spirit of renunciation. Vairagya. Unless that person is actually living a life which is dedicated to self-purification and self-knowledge. And this self-knowledge means a knowledge of the self. Who are we? Self-knowledge. Because mere birth or parentage or even a position cannot make a person Pandit. When these hypocrite Pandits, they lead, the Lord of Death says the leader and the led would ultimately reach a similar tragic situation. Just as when a blind man is led by equally blind man. He uses over here deluded in many crooked ways. So this delusion can come from many different areas. And this crookedness is because of we keep on cultivating imperfections in us. We are supposed to be on the path of perfection, but we just keep on slipping. And this is a spiritual ignorance. We keep on developing our desires. We want to just satisfy our senses. We are running after those ishnas. Putreshna, Viteshna, Lokeshna. So as a consequence of their indifference to their own real nature, the self, they develop an acute sense of ego also. I am learned. I have a position. I can do whatever I want to. And this consequent pain, riddle, varieties of I-ness and my-ness. That is the darkness. That is the darkness. So this is what he is telling us. That cultivate good qualities. Purify yourself. Let's look at one more. Verse number 6. Na samprayaha pratibhati balam pramadhyantam vitmohen mudam ayam lokaha na asti para iti manihi punha punha vasham apadyate me. Na means not. Samprayaha. Sampraya means the deeper meaning is the spiritual means of attaining glorious life and pratibhati after death is apparent. Okay, so sampraya pratibhati. So we got to use the means which are based upon the spirituality to reach that glorious life after this physical death. Balam, to the childish. Bal. Pramatyantam, ignorant. With mohen, by the glamour of wealth. Moodam, deluded. Ayam means this, lokaha means world, na asti, there is no, paraha, other. Iti, thus, mani, thinker. Punha punha, again and again, vasham, control, apadyate, attains, ne means mind. The way to the hereafter is not apparent to the ignorant. So that means they really don't think about it. It's not obvious to them. Who is childish? Befooled by the glamour of wealth. So he is calling a child to a person who is choosing the path of pleasant. He used the word mandbuddhi also, but over here he is using balam, child, ignorant. This is the only world he thinks. There is no other. Thus he falls again and again under my sway. My sway means this Yamraj is saying this kind of a person keeps on coming here again and again, tempted to these worldly pleasures, the worldly desires. The worldly wealth is so alluring to this kind of a person, to this child. So a person who's constantly and entirely engaged in the pursuit of earning, procuring, and holding material wealth. This is the kind of a person he's talking about. His head and heart is all just into the worldly wealth. So he says afterwards also, because sooner or later we have to leave this mortal world. So he says that person will come back here again. So to such a pure materialistic person, the life in this plane of consciousness, I mean, while they live also, there are a lot of sweat, lot of tears. Sure, there are joys here and there, but fleeting joys, not a sustainable joy. To them, the ideals of a higher and diviner life doesn't even make sense. They don't think about it. It's not even a possibility for them. So that's why he used word the child. Even if they are told of the existence of the higher realizable life or to a greater perfection, either they don't have the intellectual capacity because they did not work on it to grasp such a philosophical ideal, and they don't even have a mental accommodation to feel that divinity because this work was not done. Purification was not done. Because unless the mind is free of the turbot and the torment, cannot absorb this. It's almost like a lake. Lake has a dirty water and lake has a lot of waves in it. Cannot see the bottom. The same thing happened to this kind of a person who is constantly into this material world. Where can I have this? Where can I go? How can I please myself, my senses? How others are looking at me? How I can use them? Or even control them? All that is part of it. So to such a childish person, the materialist, this short and uncertain span of existence is all that is a life that came from nowhere. They say we were born just to enjoy over here. So such a man, such a person cannot and will not be fit for a philosophical contemplation. If something like this is dear to us, that means we have done some work on our mind and intellect. If even listening to it making sense, and it's encouraging us to purify ourselves, that means we have done some work. That doesn't mean that goal has been reached, but at least we have started on this path. So life of self-control, in fact, a conscious life of self-control for the pursuit of the higher. Constant self-discipline, constantly keeping one eye on the ultimate goal while we are living here. That's what a serious student does. Okay, so let's stop it here, and then we can have some time for the question answers, and then after that we'll meditate. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vishishyate. Om Shanti 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 Om.